The mad scene. Enter Ophelia. I mean, just imagine hurling that line at your own mother while she's descending into a drug-induced hallucination. Welcome to the Tyrone household. In Eugene O'Neill's absolute masterpiece, literature isn't just, something you read to pass the time on a rainy Sunday. No, it is used as a cruel, calculated weapon. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking O'Neill's devastatingly brilliant autobiographical play, Long Day's Journey into Night. Specifically, we're going to explore this really fascinating critical view, the idea that O'Neill's heavy use of literary quotes isn't just window dressing or character decoration. It's actually a fundamental dramatic tool. Think of these borrowed words as a psychological puzzle. When we start piecing them together, they completely expose the deep fractures running right through the Tyrone family.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for dismantling the psyches of these four haunted characters. We'll start with the battlefield of books, then look at James the traditionalist, Edmund the modernist, Jamie the weaponizer, and finally, Mary and her unspoken alienation.
Section 1, the battlefield of books. Let's set the stage by looking at the actual physical space of the Tyrone living room. O'Neill actually grounds this entire complex psychological war right in the tangible stage props surrounding them. The living room features these two highly contrasting bookcases that essentially establish a visual, physical divide. On one side, you've got this large, glass-fronted bookcase. It's filled with the traditional heavyweights. Think 3 sets of Shakespeare, Dumas, Victor Hugo. That's the patriarch, James's territory. But then, on the other side, there's this small, crammed bookcase stuffed with modernists and decadents. We're talking Balzac, Poe, Oscar Wilde, Baudelaire, Nietzsche. This represents the avant-garde, deeply cynical worldview of the Sons. So, the generational and ideological conflict? It's literally built right into the furniture. Now, if we look at this through a Freudian lens, it clicks. These guys aren't just quoting literature to show off how smart they are. They are employing a massive defense mechanism. This constant stream of quotes acts as a kind of linguistic armor, protecting them from the crippling anxiety of their shared trauma, their immense guilt, and the sheer agony of watching their family fall apart. Moving on to Section 2, let's take a closer look at James, the Shakespearean traditionalist. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the immense paradox of James's life. See, he exclusively quotes Shakespeare because he was actually once a highly promising Shakespearean actor. The guy even played Othello to massive critical acclaim. But, and here's the tragedy, driven by this deep-seated, paralyzing childhood fear of poverty, he traded all that incredible artistic talent for the easy money of a commercial potboiler. Basically, a crowd-pleasing play like The Count of Monte Cristo. He bought the golden handcuffs. So now he hides behind Shakespeare's grand words to mask the absolute agony of sacrificing his artistic soul just for financial safety. You will notice throughout the play, James constantly relies on classical Shakespearean verse, like that famous line from Julius Caesar. Why does he do this? He's desperately trying to impose moral certainty and a sense of order onto an intensely chaotic household. By leaning on the structured, familiar morality of classic tragedy, it's like he's trying to build a fortress against the horrifying fact that his own pathological cheapness is what led to his wife's morphine addiction. He desperately wants to believe in a world where actions have clear, noble consequences, completely turning a blind eye to the incredibly messy reality he helped create. All right, Section 3, Edmund the modernist decadent. Let's look at the younger son. If James uses literature to build a fortress, Edmund absolutely uses it to dig a grave. Edmund pulls his quotes entirely from that small, rebellious bookcase we talked about. His father actually dismisses his favorite writers as atheists, fools, and madmen. Edmund leans hard on pessimistic, decadent poets and philosophers, writers like Charles Baudelaire, Ernest Dowson, Friedrich Nietzsche. These thinkers clash, visually, audibly, philosophically, with his father's romanticized view of the world. They represent a total rejection of James's traditional, pull-yourself-up-by-your-bootstraps American dream. Just look at the specific words Edmund chooses to channel. This Baudelaire quote perfectly captures Edmund's deep, existential despair. Remember, he's just been diagnosed with tuberculosis, which back then was a terrifying, potentially fatal consumption. For Edmund, life right now feels incredibly precarious and just agonizing. He uses the dark words of these decadent poets to voice his morbid desire to just dissolve into the fog. He wants to escape the horrible burden of time and, honestly, the suffocating atmosphere of his family's guilt. Let's move to and see how this builds with Section 4, Jamie, the cynical weaponizer. Jamie takes this whole literary warfare dynamic to a terrifying new level. While James uses literature to hide his guilt and Edmund uses it to escape his reality, Jamie, He actively weaponizes it. Jamie is super educated, sure, but he's completely trapped in this vicious cycle of alcoholism and self-loathing, and he projects all of that failure right onto his family. He harbors this manic, depressive, insanely toxic jealousy toward his younger brother's potential. He literally uses poetry to articulate the dead part of himself, the part that actively wants to drag Edmund down into the mud right alongside him. The crucial point here is exactly how he expresses this toxicity. He quotes Oscar Wilde's The Ballad of Reading Gaol, specifically the line, "Yet each man kills the thing he loves." Jamie is chillingly self-aware. He knows he's a destructive force. He even warns Edmund that he is deliberately trying to set a horrible example, secretly hoping Edmund will fail just as spectacularly as he did. He twists Wilde's cynical, tragic words to justify this awful, twisted urge to completely ruin his brother's artistic promise. And Jamie's literary weaponization hits its absolute devastating peak at the climax of the play. As their mother Mary walks into the room, totally lost in a morphine haze, Jamie quotes Swinburne's A Leave-Taking. It is such a heartbreaking use of verse. He uses the poem to underscore the tragic, utter finality of Mary's psychological withdrawal from them all. Those words seal the tomb on the family's hope. I mean, she's physically standing right there, but mentally, she is gone forever. Which brings us to our final section, Part 5, Mary, the Unspoken Alienation. And this brilliantly illustrates the true tragic center of the play. Amidst this massive storm of Shakespeare, Baudelaire, and Swinburne flying across the room, Mary is assigned absolutely no literary allusions, not a single one. She doesn't quote anyone. Instead, she is aesthetically linked only to the physical act of playing a Chopin waltz on the piano, and she plays it haltingly with these stiff, arthritic fingers. Her silence in this chaotic literary battlefield is, tragically, her defining trait. Because she lacks this literary armor, she's left completely defenseless. The men in the family share this heavily guarded defensive language, this aggressive volleying of quotes, and she is entirely shut out of it. She is so profoundly alienated inside her own home. Her past dreams, wanting to be a concert pianist or a nun, they were totally shattered by her husband's cheapness and the medical malpractice that sparked her addiction. Since she can't fight back with poetry like the men do, Mary's only escape from the ugliness of her reality is to literally retreat into the morphine-induced fog of the past. In the end, O'Neill paints a picture of a family literally drowning in a sea of stolen words. The men are using some of the greatest literature in history, not to connect with each other, but to deflect. They quote geniuses so they don't have to speak the truth to one another. And Mary, who has no quotes to hide behind, simply fades away into the drug. It leaves us with this haunting realization about the limits of communication, and a really profound question to walk away with. If the words we borrow are meant to hide our pain, what happens when we run out of things to say?